Good evening, all. It is currently Tuesday, September 26, 2023. The time is 6:06 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Act 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings will be available upon request to planning@somervillema.gov. We'll start with a roll call vote. Deborah Fennick.
Here.
Andrew Abba.
Here.
Sherry Ruane.
Here.
Frank Valdez. Tim Talon. And Tim Hood.
Present.
All right, with 4 members in attendance, we do have quorum. Also in attendance this evening with me is my co-chair from OSPCD Office of Public Space and Urban Forestry, Courtney Kirk, and operating the tech is Emily Hutchings. All right, so first order of business are to approve the minutes from August 8th and September 12th, 2023. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to any of those minutes? No, all right, seeing none. Let's roll call vote on both of those. Andrew Abba.
Approved, yes.
Sherry.
Approved.
Deborah.
Approved the first one, and the 12th I was not in attendance, so I'm not able to approve.
Abstain.
So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm abstaining from that one.
All right. And Tim Hood.
Yes, approved.
Okay. Note for the record that Tim Talon has just joined us. Tim, we were just taking a vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from August 8th and September 12th. So do you have a vote on that?
I'll abstain from the August 8th since I wasn't present, but vote to approve the September 12th.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. All right, next order of business is the recommendation for 53 Chester Street. Freely admit that I don't have any recollection about this project, so I wonder if it appeared when I was away. Are there any comments on that recommendation?
I didn't realize there was a recommendation for review. I thought it was just a design review this evening. Oh, you know what? This was August 8th, so I wasn't present
Okay.
for that one. So I'll abstain on this as well.
All right, so Emily, quick question. Do we need to take a vote on the recommendation?
This is Emily Hutchings. I believe so, but give me one moment to double check the rules of policy and procedure because I know it's written in there and I do not want to give the wrong answer.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, for the 720 through 722 Broadway project, Tim Talon, did you get an opportunity to listen to the meeting and submit the affidavit?
I did listen to the meeting, and I realized I have not submitted the affidavit yet, but I can do that right now.
Okay. While Emily's looking that up, that would be terrific if you could, please. You know what? Let's just take a vote for the sake of taking a vote to be safe. How about that? All right. To approve the recommendation for 53 Chester Street. A roll call vote. Andrew Abba.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Deborah.
Yes.
And Tim Hood.
Yes.
Tim Talon. I'm assuming you would like to abstain since you weren't at the meeting.
Abstain.
Thank
Yes,
you.
abstain.
All right, so with that, that carries. And I just realized with the change in the liaisons, I don't have to call you Andrew Abba anymore. I can just say Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
All right, moving on to the design reviews for 720 through 722 Broadway. This project is continued from September 9th, 2023. So if the applicants can raise their hands so that Emily can unmute you.
Madam Co-Chair, this is Emily Hutchings. I am promoting Chris Vance to a panelist for the applicant.
Just before we get started, I'm trying to open the affidavit form. It seems like I'm unable to open the attachment that Emily had sent. Emily, would it be possible to send that as a PDF?
Yes, give me one moment, Tim. Sorry.
All right, Chris, are you there?
I am here. Yep.
Okay. There you are. All right,
How are you?
terrific. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. Would you be able to also promote Katya from Verdant Landscaping as a presenter?
Madam Co-Chair, this is Emily Hutchings. I've just promoted Katya.
Thank you.
Hi there, everybody.
Are we wait for Tim?
Yes, that would be, I think we can start any presentation that you have.
Going to give me just a minute here. I was able to open it as a Google document.
Apologize, I'm not seeing the control to share my screen.
Sorry, Chris, this is Emily Hutchings. Madam Chair, through you, give me one moment. I will make you a presenter.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. Oh, there we
All
go.
right. You should be able to-
Are you able to see my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Tim Talon, are you okay multitasking for Chris to begin?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Chris Vance from Vance Architects, 254 Bay Road, South Hamilton, business address. So that we have a continuation And I believe at the last board meeting, the UDC meeting, we had reviewed the facade option, the most current option, and that was approved by the board. And we were asked to update the landscape plan. And I have Katya here from Verdant Landscape Architecture to go through that updated landscape plan, which incorporates the changes to the building. One being the setback, creating the outdoor seating space along Broadway. And also we were asked to look at the green score, assuming that we were unable to save the one site tree. I believe Andrew had brought that up. So Katya and I did work through that, and I'll actually turn it over to her to walk through the landscape plan.
Thank you very much. Can you go to the next page? This is a beautiful rendering, but yeah, I'd love to look at the landscape plan. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
So again, back one, there you go. So my name is Katya Posadlo, principal at Verdant Landscape Architecture. This is our most recent landscape plan, which represents the updated architectural footprint that Chris mentioned. Some of the facade has been pulled back along the streetscape especially, but there have been some other good moves that have afforded additional green space, which I'll describe. But first, briefly, I want to go through like the public realm to begin with, and then focus on those other finer tuned changes. So Broadway is along the bottom of the page, and Willow Ave, the side street, is along the left side in this plan. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go through the public realm first and the sidewalks. There is a couple of existing trees along Willow Ave. The smallest green circle on the left is a little ash tree that we will protect as part of the project. There is another street tree close to our proposed curb cut that we need to remove, and therefore we will obviously need to apply for a tree removal permit. And in its place, you can see we're adding a new street tree in its, not in its exact location, but a little bit further northward, which is down the page on Willow, to replace the lost canopy there. This is in order to accommodate parking facing in, excuse me, I just got a notification, inward, facing, not being parking close to the property line along the abutters, et cetera. So that was a move that we had to make. And we also, since the last time, have added 2 new shade trees out front where we do have some electrical conduit lines underneath the sidewalk. And we're not certain we can plant in these locations, but we will try and further coordinate with, when the building is being constructed. If there's enough room to plant street trees, we will do so. I'm assuming the concrete sidewalks would need to be repaved, and whatever excavation can be provided to provide like structural soil and accommodate generous root zones for new street trees to be planted. If it's possible, we will do so. In this configuration, which works around other things that are along the street light. So there's a lot of actually utilities and parking meters and light poles, an existing bike rack, which I think we're moving a little bit. So there's a bunch of things happening along that streetscape, which we will have to work around, but we're hoping to be able to plant 2 new street trees. So I know that was a concern last time, and we have shown that we're doing our best effort to do, 2 new trees here. The frontage of the building, you can see, has been pulled back along Broadway to be able to accommodate and activate a really cool outdoor seating space in front of the bakery. And in between the table area, you can see there those little white tables lined up. We're adding a planter to help differentiate between the sort of like seating area and the pedestrian zone along Broadway. Along the rear, we were also able to carve out additional green space and nice green things. We're now showing 3 large shade trees to be planted in an enlarged green space in the rear. And we do show that we're going to try to save the catalpa tree that's on the far right. It's a smaller green circle right on the property line. Although we understand, maybe it won't survive, and therefore, although we show it here, we understand maybe it won't, and that was one of your concerns that was brought up last time. So we think it has a good chance. To be honest, I'm not super familiar with catalpa tree roots and how, how they grow. Are they like Norway maples and super invasive and maybe they'll survive construction nearby? But I just don't know. So we'll try, and if we're able to, we will. In its place, assuming that it won't survive, we will plant 3 new trees as well as a whole host of native shrubs underneath those new trees. One of the bigger moves that if we were to have side-by-side comparison of last time to this time, we had previously shown a trash, like a dumpster enclosure at the end of the driveway between the purplish color permeable pavers and this green space. There was a dumpster enclosure, but that particular use is kind of tucked into the building footprint now, out of the way of the green space. So the footprint has become much more efficient, I guess you'd say. So all those uses are within that footprint and don't take up the green space, which is nice. We also have provided a little bench seating area adjacent to the green space so that people who live here can come out of this back door that's adjacent to the bike room and back lobby entry area and enjoy the green space there. And the permeable pavers are intentional to try to create that purple zone to try to create more of a pedestrian feeling to what is also needing to be a drive aisle. And that the pavers would run up to the back door to create that whole zone in a real pedestrian kind of, with that pedestrian feeling. And then the whole building is actually framed with a neat little band of pavers outside of the typical concrete paving pedestrian zone. So it's within that frontage zone that's left over between that and the building facade. So residents can go utilize that bench. It's sort of like a nice little easy place to sit and wait for someone to arrive, or et cetera. But we also have an amenity space up on the deck. So if you could go to the next page, it shows on the back side of the building, sort of over top that parking area, up on the 4th floor is our primary residential amenity space. We have developed this, it's approximately 12 feet wide by 50 feet long, and developed it so that it has a couple different zones for gathering, so more than one group of people can come out here and enjoy it, and you won't feel like you're right on top of each other. We're thinking like maybe one could be like a picnic table kind of thing, and then the other could be like a group of Adirondack chairs or like one of those outdoor wicker living room sets, something like that. And the space, this patio area, is surrounded by a vegetated green roof that does grow in its depth to be able to accommodate, in some locations alongside that edge of the building, some shrubs and some ornamental grasses. And then in between those two zones, we had placed a lightweight planter to accommodate some other plants to separate those two spaces. So it's not just a flat like sedum area all the way around. There's some height to the plantings, which will be a really pleasant area in the back. And it's south facing, so it'll get some good solar exposure. The last thing I wanted to mention had to do with the green score, which we do meet. I think we have 0.27 if I'm not mistaken. This last page shows the various details for the permeable paving, installation, planting details, and then the calculator that shows how we got to the 0.27. Can't read it on the screen here right now, but that concludes the landscape. There may be specific questions, but I hadn't been at the previous hearings to know all of your concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if Chris, if there's anything that I'm missing, please feel free to jump in and fill in the spaces. Thank you.
It would be helpful if you could zoom in on the back area and the front area where the planter is that you referenced that separates the tables from the street. Those aren't clear from the...
Yeah, it overlapped with a tree canopy. So can you go to the left there, Chris? Yes. There's a column that comes down at the corner where the double doors enter into the bakery. That helps divide or sort of punctuate the change in use from walking down the sidewalk to being within the bakery zone, if you will. But we further separated the pedestrian traffic with that one planter. It's it'd be one of those like lightweight, or maybe not lightweight, doesn't need to be, but I was envisioning it as like one of those Wilshire, Tournesol Wilshire planters. It's rectangular, fairly skinny, like 2 feet wide. And it wouldn't have to be arranged exactly like this is shown. It could be moved up and down that property line as the case might warrant. It wouldn't need to be right in place where, stay there forevermore. The idea being that you could be sitting right behind it and kind of enjoy the, the snacks or whatever, a cup of coffee.
Before any comments are made, I just would like to make one point of clarification about the public street tree that is proposed for removal. That is a public tree that is protected by state law, so you will be required to have a tree hearing for the proposed removal of that tree. That can be scheduled with our liaison for the Urban Forestry Commission. I believe you can email trees@somervillema.gov. If it's a healthy tree, they are likely to deny removal. Are you prepared to have a different plan in place? Or, additionally, engineering has to approve new driveway curb cuts. So you are proposing something that, the two are very dependent on outside factors.
I don't know if Chris has an answer to that, but obviously our driveway or parking arrangement depends on a curb cut that's moved slightly from its current configuration, which is nearby where we're proposing it, but this new location would impact that one tree. It's a Norway maple, the one that's existing out on the street. I don't know if that makes a difference to anyone.
I think you previously said it was an ash tree.
The existing ash tree that's further down the page is a small ash tree that's existing or is not proposed to be removed. The one that's being proposed to be removed is a Norway maple. I don't know if that matters to the review board, but we would do that. Excuse me?
You still have to have a tree hearing.
Sure, yeah, we would do that, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, we'd also work with engineering on the new proposed curb cut. Like Katya said, it's very close to the existing curb cut. We're just moving it north slightly to accommodate the new drive.
Is there anything preventing you from having more planters along that edge? Like, why is it just a short 8 feet, is it, segment? Or, I don't know. I feel like potentially having them in some sort of rhythm along that edge would help further enhance the urban realm, provide some circulation. I'm not proposing like a solid wall, or I'm not thinking a solid wall, but it's just like, why there? Why that length?
Yeah, I think we weren't trying to be prescriptive, and I think the idea is that it would be that they're two of them and they are close together. They could be separated out, and maybe it looks funny because it's in that location right underneath a tree canopy. I know what you mean. Maybe there could be a rhythm. I wouldn't want it to be a solid wall, just because I think the circulation to and from the tables is more important from the street than providing the enclosed. It's not a place where people are going to be served, and there's some, it's not outdoor dining in a formal sense. So I think flow to and from the sidewalk would be important. But
I agree. It just feels odd, right? It's not like perfectly centered, or if the placement feels a little bit arbitrary. And I think if it is going to be planted and maintained and offering some vegetation and visual interest, that having it either alternating each table, whatever, that having some rhythm along that edge could further enhance what I think we all recognize is a populated by lots of other things sidewalk. So hopefully you can get the trees in, but barring that, these planters are it if you can't get those trees in. So that was just one observation.
Understood. Yeah, we'd be happy to arrange them in more of like a rhythm with separated so that they're not ganged up right there.
And then if you could just point to the bench just show the bench. That's another item that's sort of under a tree canopy and very hard to read from a distance, maybe not even
Yeah,
render.
it's right by the,
Here it
yeah,
is.
it's right by the pink colored shrub
Yeah.
at the
You can't
corner of the building.
occupy that space at all? Did you consider making that an occupiable space where folks could actually enter and occupy, or was it just never considered? I'm curious because we brought that up at the last meeting.
I hadn't considered creating a place for people to occupy. I was thinking about green space, pervious softscape that can suck up water and that kind of thing. So I did not intend for there to be a patio back here. I think the main amenity is up on the roof deck. Rear porch, if you will, is what I feel like people would, it's used sort of like a rear porch. And this space, because it's adjacent to the driveway, felt like more of a way by, like a lay by, wait for someone or come and go and, get your shoe, you put your shoes back on or whatever you're doing. I don't know what, wait for, lean your bike up against the building while you put your trash in and then you go in, whatever.
Right. I'd request the bench be moved away from the trash. If that is a place that you're waiting for your Uber or whatever. I don't know if right up against the trash is where I'd want to sit.
Yeah, I'll tell you the reasoning I thought of it there is because if there were a car parked in the closest parking space to that bench, as they back up, they might be more prone to hitting a bench in that upper right-hand corner instead of where it is. I don't think it could ever be hit by, it's a little more protected from any kind of random driveway vehicular traffic.
Yeah, all of that feels very car driven, right? I guess what we had asked in the last meeting, and I know that you weren't there, was, is there a way to make this feel on some level people prioritized instead of car prioritized? And I know that you've got a green score to meet, and so maybe that was driving why you would have a lot of shrubs instead of lawn that is, occupiable and accessible and also soaks up water. I don't know, it seems like it's more about meeting the score and less about creating an occupiable urban realm that sort of contributes to just a greener experience.
Yeah, it's definitely about meeting the score, that's for sure, because it's a very tight site. So I don't know what the preference would be to, create the patio or a lawn space and lower the green score points. Would that be okay if we don't quite meet the green score? Or, it's tough to meet the green score in some instances. In this particular case, it's been tough.
It ultimately sort of becomes an architectural issue. Like the architecture needs to give you more space to work.
Yeah, I mean, this area is under the second floor. So in terms of vegetation and the appropriate use, of that space, it is protected and shaded. So you wouldn't really be able to create a garden or, a space under that building that would allow sufficient light. So the way it's programmed and the way it works with the architecture is that, this is a ride share pickup space, serves for the trash and the sort of utilitarian function of the building.
And one clarification, this parking is intended to serve the bakery. Is that correct?
Yeah, this would be, yes.
And the parking, I think, as we discussed last time, is not required.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
question
I know there was some discussion about the parking. It's not required, but it is their option and decision on whether to provide it. It is a very limited amount of parking for this use. So, and I think especially considering
it's a choice they're making that impacts the ability of people who are not driving to enjoy outdoor space as well. I think that's what we're kind of acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
The residents will have a less good experience because of this parking.
But the patrons of the bakery will have a better experience because of the parking. And I think,
I mean, ultimately we have zoning that allows this because that's what the city is trying to encourage. There are other places in the city that allow for parking. And these districts are specifically called out because of their adjacency to the T as not having parking. And if nobody chooses to enforce that, or we always sort of roll over for the car, then there's no point in having that rule.
Yeah,
just-
and I'd say zoning includes a parking maximum.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
Limiting the amount of parking that provides the flexibility to provide a limited amount, which is being done
Yeah.
here.
But we're
And-
looking at a project that's basically giving us public space that's exclusively, we're looking at outdoor space at the ground level that's being filled with plants to meet a green score because the parking is being proposed.
And the removal of a public tree, which I looked it up in our inventory. It's an ash tree. I can put the link to the tree inventory in the chat. It's available to the public on our website. So again, you're removing a public tree for parking that's not required.
Sorry, I didn't mean to come down as a heavy, but I genuinely appreciate the trees that are being proposed, and I understand the issues with that on Broadway, and I thank you guys for doing that. The question I had was, it's sort of still a lingering question. It may be more of an architecture question. I look at that stairwell on the street that is not Broadway, and it still looks closer than 12 feet from back of curb to me. The stair one kicks out closer to the curb than the 12-inch dimension string that I'm looking at down below, which seems like it's still not within the window that it's supposed to be in.
Yeah, we can we can double check that.
And then the other piece, I think, to double check and maybe clarify too, the bike racks that I'm looking at, just the positioning of them on the plan, it looks like if you were to put a bike in there, it would be sticking out pretty significantly in both directions into the space for handicap loading, and then into what will feel like the sidewalk as well.
Yeah, I believe that they're measured out at, I forget what the minimum is. There should be a dimension on here, and we didn't put it on this one. They don't overlap into the concrete public sidewalk zone, but I believe it's at least 6 feet. I don't have the number there in front of me. And I apologize about that. I looked very quickly to refresh my memory on the species of the tree, and without the leaves on it, the Google Street View today shows a winter picture of that tree. And briefly, I thought it was a Norway maple. You're totally right. It's an ash. So I apologize about that.
And is there any screening provided between the sidewalk and the bike racks or are we looking straight into the parking area from the sidewalk?
It's open between, yeah, we were using that space, so trying to double up with vehicular use, like ganging up what's happening for vehicular circulation. And we found a convenient location underneath the overhang for bike racks. So they're, it's kind of nice that they're protected underneath the building above.
And also
architecturally, nothing comes down to prevent you from just looking into the parked cars?
No, and that's how you would have access to put the bike in and out, is to roll up the sidewalk, down the sidewalk and then roll right in from the sidewalk side, not from, I guess they could do it from the access aisle of the ADA parking space too, but I think we were thinking of it being more of a visitor bike rack rather than within the parking lot kind of a bike rack.
Yeah, and that I think that increases the pedestrian and the resident experience to not have that like you're entering in through a sort of enclosed parking garage space, but it's actually open air and there's more movement. You can see the tree. Also creates some safety. They can have visual views to Willow. Yeah, and to go back to the parking, Lindell specifically has that as part of their lease agreement to provide parking. So, there's a strong need and push for keeping that parking for Lindell's to stay there.
So having reviewed the project, the meeting in August, and then heard the presentation tonight, I think there's a number of certainly significant improvements from the first time this was presented, both to the building architecture and the site plan, notwithstanding some of the comments that have been made by my colleagues tonight. I appreciate the changes at the entry and the outdoor seating area, that relief at the corner. I think that was one of the comments at the first meeting, in providing that outdoor seating area. Both opens up the pedestrian path of travel to the main entry doors to the bakery, as well as provides that relief and outdoor dining area on the sidewalks. So I think that's a significant improvement. Also appreciate the aspiration to provide the street trees. And I hope you're able to follow through on that, and hope this can set a precedent for the square, the future installation of street trees. One thing that jumps out at me on this plan that we brought up initially, that still seems strange to me, is the division between the concrete sidewalk and the permeable pavers, where that falls right at the property line. Looking at the plan, it's very clear why it falls there. It's the property line, but no one can see a property line in real life. When traversing the sidewalk, there's just going to be that transition between materials falling kind of midway between the pedestrian zone. It's almost like the furnishing zone of the sidewalk got flipped and pushed up against the building, rather than against the curb. So I wonder, again, knowing that you're trying, that some of these decisions are being made by the abstract statistical exercise of putting together a green score chart, is there some flexibility to find what that right dimension off the face of the building is for the permeable paving? Maybe it's 2 feet wide instead of 4'4". So instead of a 4'6" dimension between the tree pit and the permeable paving, you're getting, something closer to 6 feet, a continuous pedestrian path of a single material through there.
Yeah, I
the other
appreciate
situation.
Excuse me, sorry. Go ahead.
Just one other. The other location that feels odd to me is the corner at the intersection where that permeable paving is pushing out awful close to the curb. I'm not sure how that would feel for the pedestrian. Would you feel pinched walking around that corner? Certainly there's enough space to get around the column, but the transition in material is happening at a strange space.
We can take another look at that and make refine and try to make a more regular frame around the building as you're suggesting. I appreciate that. I think framing around the column is kind of a cool idea with the unit pavers, but agree that it shouldn't be just that regular, like exactly at the property line for the sake of it being at the property line, because there's the line that's drawn. So I understand that.
I had a couple questions. It was brought up about the proximity of stair 1 to the curb. And then looking at the plan, I noticed that both of the stairs are egressing through a lobby. As I understand the building code, you're only allowed one stair to egress through a lobby and the other stair egress to a public way. So I was wondering if the architect could comment on that, if there was something in the code that was allowing this. And then my second question was, in Google Earth, I was seeing an electrical box on the sidewalk in front of the glass. I'm guessing it operates the stoplight at the corner. So I was wondering how that piece of equipment coordinates with the public way shown on these plans, if it's being proposed to keep it in the same spot, or if it's being proposed to move somewhere, and where that.
Tim, I need to interrupt a little bit because we're outside the purview of the Urban Design Commission, unfortunately. If it is in the public right of way, it will be dealt with as this building goes through further permitting by the engineering and the mobility divisions. And so I think your advice about the building code and exiting is very good, but that's not something that the Urban Design Commission is charged with vetting.
My comment is I was expecting a door to exit the building at the public way. So my understanding that was part of our purview.
Yeah, so
Yeah, we would,
as far as
fire
the,
rating.
yeah, Chris, if you would like to address that.
Yeah, I mean, the fire rating would carry through that corridor. So you're bringing that fire rating of stair 2 all the way through. So all the doors be fire rated. So you're actually creating that fire rated enclosure to the public way. We do have a code consultant on board, so all that will be addressed.
And Sarah, were you also saying that my question about the public utility will be addressed by another committee?
Yeah, unfortunately, because it is, if it is a transportation related object, this applicant will have very little control over what that does. So I think we can put it as a recommendation to flag it for further investigation, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to actually do much about it.
Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to understand where that piece of equipment exists relative to the architecture in the drawing.
Chris, do you have an elevation that shows that?
I mean, we'd have to go look at the civil plan and then see exactly where it relates to the exterior. But I don't have the civil plan as part of this set. But we'll certainly take a look at it.
So I think one of the things, if we can take notes that when we get to the voting on additional design guidance, that is probably something that's worth flagging.
Could we go to the building renderings to talk a little about the building architecture? So I know a vote was taken last time to recommend this facade option, and glad to see that. I think this is, again, a significant improvement from what was first presented. It does feel like there are still two distinct pieces, but it feels much more cohesive. So just want to compliment you on that. A couple of questions. The dark material, dark gray, is that a brick?
This is, yeah.
That is a brick. Okay. So it's precast, those precast.
Precast down.
Those bands are spanning between brick.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So my other comment is related to, I guess it would be the west side of the building. So the view from Broadway. I know this came up last time as well. That side of the building facing the house next door, and I guess to the west. It's a pretty visually prominent wall. And understand that this is a decision about materiality that's being made because brick is more expensive. So carrying the brick around the corner could be a cost there. But thinking about this as I won't call it the historic piece, but the historic commission approved piece, or the historically referencing piece. There's a lot of examples around Somerville, including across the street, where there's one type of brick used facing a main street, higher quality brick, and then a lower quality brick on the side of a building. And that's pretty common for early 20th century and late 19th century commercial buildings of a similar height. So I wonder if here, you see coining at the corner or other ways to kind of transition that higher quality brick to the brick used on the side of the building. So I wonder whether there's the opportunity to do something similar here, because it feels really, it's a jarring transition between the fiber cement and the brick there. And it makes that brick facade feel very thin.
Yeah, and if I can pick up from there on that comment, Tim, you're talking about the party wall side, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's it's not even necessarily a material, but just a color that you've got. I think if it were a darker color, it would be less jarring than it is with that. You see the figure of the brick cutting back. So, for me, it's just a contrast thing. I think is, you can't transition to a brick, which would of course be preferable. I think not to have it as distinct. One thing that I know I brought up last time, I think so. The streetscape and all that with the cutback, I think is really nice. To Tim's comment about the extent of the permeable pavers. I think it's almost okay. I think if it followed the curb, it was responding to the curb geometries and not the building geometries. That corner, it carried that. It was parallel to the sidewalk at the corner, so that the width of the sidewalk was consistent as you went around the corner. I think would be, maybe that's the adjustment that this, the most important adjustment that this would take. Does that make sense, Katja?
Yeah, I like that. Do you mean a curve though? Because the corner has a curve.
Nope.
Curve line.
Oh, it is curved. To generally follow it, so it feels like the sidewalk is primary and consistent, and and not pinched, as Tim was saying.
Right.
So
yeah, agreed. And I think a consistent concrete sidewalk so that there's a straight line path of travel for easy navigation makes sense. Yes, I agree. And maybe there's some places where it's, the regular 2-foot width is held and it doesn't really make much difference because the rest of it's concrete and it's, more or less 4.5 or 5 feet or whatever it is up along Willow. And then elsewhere it does what you're describing on Broadway, maybe. I'll take a look at it and figure out what makes most sense.
That's where that I think is could be resolved better. And I still feel like the facade, this floating building where where the parking is, and I fully appreciate, Christopher, your comment about wanting to see in there for security reasons. But I feel like that the bike parking, I feel like there could be some kind of screening, or even making the cornice, deeper, as we look at it, maybe it is with screening rather than solid stuff. That does, just gives more, gives a little more definition, that enclosed space. You know, it feels like it's floating, and I think that I just, you know, feel like that's a very, and you know, it's not a typical residential condition, and it's certainly not a comfortable residential condition. So anyway, I would suggest that there's a little more something that, you know, the proportions of the volume are a little awkward too, and I think if it felt a little deeper, you know, it was not that consistent datum all the way around the building might help too. It scaled down a little bit. So anyway, that is my final comment. I think this has, I think this is going to be a great addition to Ball Square.
I think those are good comments, and so we need to make sure we add those as additional guidance. But we did take a vote on the facade already. So just as a reminder to the commission, so the votes that we have outstanding are to whether the design guidelines have been satisfied, whether there are priority design guidelines we want to call attention to, and then to recommend the further design guidance. So those are the three votes we still have to take.
So I'd be prepared to vote that the design guidelines are satisfied, to make a motion on that. And then I think we're going to have a good discussion about additional design guidance.
And I'll second that.
All right, so motion by Tim that the design guidelines have been met, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Andrew?
Sorry, yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Tim Talon?
Yes.
And Tim Hood?
Yes.
All right, 5 members in favor. Thank you. Do we want to go ahead and take the vote now if we're going to designate any priority design guidelines? It's only if applicable, so we can just move into the additional design guidance if you wish.
I think additional design guidance probably.
Okay. All right. So the ones that I recall, and I must say I haven't been taking notes, I have an awful memory, is the to look at the civil plans to understand where the equipment is in relation to the elevation. Were there any additional recommendations as far as the landscape goes?
Yeah,
You go, Sherry.
I was just gonna say, the planters out front, I think more spaced so pedestrians can move between the sidewalk and the seating would be an improvement for sure.
Okay.
So I would say modify the location of the transition between permeable pavers and concrete sidewalk to prioritize consistency in the pedestrian zone.
Okay. right.
They're also looking at ways to increase the usability of the rear landscape for residents in totality. To maybe reduce the what seems like primarily vehicular nature of the space in the current iteration.
I'm going to make a comment. I think this is related to additional guidance, but it's also a question. As you know, it strikes me we've been talking about the green score and being tied up against the green score. We have seen the plan of what appears to be a very nice green roof space at the third level for resident use. Was there any consideration of putting a green roof on the high roof as well to help with the green score?
We did consider it. It's you know, becomes a maintenance component, so it was you know, the first pass we were looking to keep it at a serviceable area, which would be the amenity space up on the upper level and also at the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
And because we could meet it, we you know, that was our desire, the owner's desire.
Okay. So maybe design guidance might be just a suggestion to continue to explore that as the design moves forward as a way to provide a little more flexibility on some of the at-grade areas.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like the back is truly an amenity space, right? It feels like a leftover spot that you put as many plants as you could to meet the score, but people cannot use it really. The bench is, I think, a gesture, but I feel like the fact that it had to be put next to the planter or put next to the dumpster enclosure because otherwise it might get hit by a car, it's just, like that, it hurts my heart. It's like, what is there anything we can do to make it a little, just, I don't know, it just feels like a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, and to Katya's credit, like, it's the space she has, but I mean, she's having to jam 20 pounds into a 10-pound bag.
All right.
So I guess the recommendation would be, we can just simply say, explore providing a green roof at upper roof level.
And then reimagining the at-grade space if you don't need to pack the whole thing full of shrubs under trees to meet the green score.
Yeah.
All right, so let me see if I've got this right. So I am looking for a motion to add additional design guidance.
Sorry, Sarah, I've got one more.
Okay.
So I'd like to just make a additional design guidance to provide the guidance to change the west wall of the building facing the adjacent property to brick, or provide a study of other similar building types in Somerville, historic building types, and how they transition around the corner.
You know, unfortunately, we don't really have the ability that was, you know, approved under historic. So to further study that portion of the building.
Well, I guess I'm not suggesting changing the Broadway facing elevation at all. This would be the elevation, very visible elevation facing the adjacent property.
So you're looking for material wrapping, or I'm not fully following, Tim.
Yeah, so wrapping the brick onto that side
Okay.
of the building. So it appears as a cohesive and consistent whole.
Okay. Okay. I am going to note these as I wrote them down, just so that we can all keep track of which one is which. These are not in order of priority by any means. All right, so number one, coordinate the location of the utility equipment locations with this on the civil plans with the elevations. Number two, space the planters on Broadway for improved pedestrian circulation. 3, modify the transition location between the pervious pavers and the sidewalk to prioritize consistency in the pedestrian zone. 4, increase, and this one is where I'll need help. I've got 2 here that are remarkably similar, so I'm probably going to need help from Andrew and Sherry on this. So number 4 right now is increase the usability of rear landscape for residents, potentially by reducing vehicle use. And then the other one I wrote down is planting area is not an amenity space and parking could be eliminated. So I think that one will need some finessing. Then I've also got, so that's 4 or 5. So right now 6, explore a green roof on the upper roof of the building, similar to the lower roof. And then 7 is investigate wrapping the brick material from the Broadway facade to the west elevation. Do those sound about right? And how do we want to talk about the amenity space and parking?
I don't know, we're
Yes,
saying eliminate the parking. I would love that. But at the baseline, it should be a space that accommodates pedestrian usage and vehicular usage and has some resident amenity benefit beyond simply parking, and meeting a green score.
All right, so how about this? I'll eliminate what I just listed as number 5 and have number 4 be increase the usability of the rear landscape for use by residents by minimizing vehicular use.
I don't even know if it's minimizing vehicular, it's just
let it be an amenity space.
Yeah,
Promote.
Right now,
Okay.
Right now it's a parking lot and it's a vehicle to get a green score, which are both architecturally, they're both in support of the architecture. They're not landscape as a usable space.
Right, okay. All right, so increase the usability of the rear landscape as an amenity space for residents. All right. Those again, or do we think we have what we need? I have a thumbs up from Andrew and a thumbs up from Tim. All right, All right, and from Sherry. All right, thank you. So hopefully everybody followed that that was our motion. And so I am now going to ask for who will move the motion and who will second.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Andrew.
Not all at once, guys.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Deborah. Thank you. All right, roll call vote. Andrew,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
and Tim Hood.
Yes.
All right, so with 5 voting in support, we have our additional design guidance, and that would be the last vote for this project. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Chris and Katja.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yes,
Yeah,
you too.
sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
And with that, that is the end of our agenda for this evening. So I need one more motion.
Motion to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn by Sherry. Do I have a second?
Adjourn.
Well, second.
Guess we're all ready to pull the trigger on that one real quick all of a sudden.
I just wanted you to sweat a little. I was.
All
Don't
right,
forget, this is our last go-to meeting. Woo-woo.
Oh,
yes,
that's
we go to Zoom next.
That's right.
All right, roll call. Andrew,
Yes, please.
Sherry,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
and Tim Hood.
Yes.
All right, let the record show the meeting adjourned at 7:14 p.m. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.